Don't all get too excited at once now, guys. I mean, man, the energy is just overwhelming. Anyways, the point is that, hello, I'm here to talk about financial aid today. We're going to go through the FAFSA application, but also we're going to do a little bit of information about the financial aid process, as well as kind of the steps and the types of things you're applying for right now. It's being recorded right now, so I do apologize for speaking quickly, but we do have a lot of stuff to cover. If you have any questions along the way, please let me know vocally, because it takes me a while to check the chat. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, let's talk a little bit about financial aid. Let me share my screen with you. There it is. Okay. All right, financial aid 101. We're going to talk today really quick about we're going to talk about the types of financial aid. We're going to talk about the financial aid forms. We're going to talk about how financial aid awards are calculated, and then the timelines of things. Kind of give you guys a heads up about what's to come. All right. There are a couple of different sources. We have the federal government. I used to call it Obama money. Then I called it Trump money, and I'll see if I call it any other money after November. State government, basically that's state of California. There is money available to you in the form of Cal grants, which is, you know, it is need based. The university scholarships, that's where a lot of the big money is. That can be anywhere from a public school or a private school. That's whenever you see university grants or scholarship, it's from their own pockets. Oftentimes it's used to kind of lure you in, say that, hey, this is how much we want you, therefore please show up. You know, loans are, whenever you see the word external scholarships are usually from outside organizations, maybe a local union or a local club. This is usually trying to support members or community members to access education with scholarships that you have to apply for separately. Loans are, whenever you see the word loan, is money that you're going to have to pay back. There are good loans and bad loans. We're going to be talking about primarily good loans, loans that I can totally support when it comes to education. And then oftentimes they expect that money comes from savings too, that your parents have a little bit of savings put aside, or that you have money put aside to help contribute to some of the cost. The three types of financial aid are, once again, is based, first of all, it's grants, free money. Whenever you see the word grant or scholarship, that's free money. That's money for you that does not need to be paid back. The hope is that you use that for school or anything related to school. This could be anything from the plane ticket or even gas money for your car. Anything that you can justify that's for school. This second type of amount is going to be loans. Once again, anytime with the word loans is borrowed money. That's eventually stuff you have to pay back. There are ways to have someone else paid back, but for the most part, we're talking about loans that you eventually will pay back. These are important because they provide opportunity. They provide access to education right now instead of having to put off like a year. That oftentimes I hear that students will say, hey, I want to work for you because I don't want to take out any loans. Well, that essentially pushes back your graduation by a whole year. You know, so loans are something that that are available so that you can have access. And then the last one is work study. Work study is essentially money that's given to your school to hire you for a job. These are some of the best jobs on campus. They can be anywhere from like putting books away in the library to be a clerk in an office to to even just checking IDs in your dorm hall, make sure that the right people are in the dormitory.
Or if you're like me, dish room at the cafeteria.
Or dish, but I mean, sure, he has life skills now. I mean, at his home, they're probably the cleanest things in the house, you know. But the point of it is that they were an opportunity for you to earn some extra cash. They're the most flexible jobs because why? They know you're a student. They know that you need time to study, and therefore they're more flexible with that. If you work a job at Starbucks, which is great and fun, but the cappuccino still needs to be made in the mornings, you know, whether you have a fine or not. You know, there's over $150 billion in federal aid money that's earmarked for helping students get access to education. We're going to be talking about the different types of aids, other like the specific aid amounts, but also how to apply for that money today. So let's talk about gift aid first. The primary one that you guys are be applying for is called Pell Grants. Okay, that's up to $6,345 per year. Right, you apply for this with one application called the FAFSA that we'll be working on today, and it's renewable for up to 6 years. The great part about the FAFSA, there's a new thing called the summer FAFSA, or summer Pell Grant, sorry, the summer Pell Grant. They'll actually allow you to use one of these 6 years or part of these 6 years in order to fund summer. In the past, you would have to take a loan out or work over the summer to get money for a summer tuition. but now that you can pull actually from those 6 years as part of it, because a lot of students are graduating within 4 or 5 years, so they have that extra year that goes kind of unused, so they can extract that amount. And usually, when we say 6 years, it's either 6 years or 12 semesters or 18 quarters, however that's broken down. Right. Cal grants, it's up to $12,570 at a UC, $5,742 at a Cal State, and $9,084 at a private accredited institution. Right. These are renewable for up to 4 years. There is a GPA requirement for this. If you have a 3.0, then you can qualify for the Cal Grant A or C. And then if you have a 2.0 to a 2.99, I think you get access to Cal Grant B, which is a smaller amount. In order to apply for that, you have to do this FAFSA as well before March 2nd. Also, you have to have a GPA uploaded to the Cal Grant website, which I have done for you already. So that's one step you don't have to worry about. You just have to worry all about focusing on that FAFSA application. Once again, that deadline is March 2nd. That's a firm deadline. Right. The hope is that we'll have that FAFSA submitted hopefully within the next few weeks. We're going to go through the bulk of the application today so you know how to answer those questions when you meet with your parents. But otherwise, it's a pretty straightforward application. University grants and scholarships. This is really dependent on the school and institution. The private schools, which have tuitions up to $55,000, they have a lot more to give, a lot more area to cover. So there's a good chance that you can get qualified, especially if there's financial need. Oftentimes, students are for the FAFSA, oftentimes I hear that I don't want to apply because my parents say we make too much money. It's a free application. It's about 20 to 30 minutes to an hour long. It can give you access to university grants and scholarships. Last year we had one family that made over $120,000. They still got about $20,000 to help with tuition. At a UC that probably money wouldn't be available, but at the private school they gave them up to $20,000 just for submitting that FAFSA. So definitely, please make sure that you are submitting these forms whether you believe you qualify for money or not. Right? Loans. So loans come in a couple of different sorts. The two main ones are going to be subsidized and unsubsidized. The loans that we're primarily talking about are the loans backed by the U.S. government, and therefore these are what we call the best loans for education. That for that freshman year, you can have up to $3,500 of subsidized loans. A subsidized loan is when the government pays the interest on the loan while you're in school. The great part about this is if you decide to go get a master's or become a doctor, there's no interest or loan payments until after you graduate. So 6 months after you graduate, that's when the repayment has to start. The interest rate actually dropped quite a bit, I think probably because of COVID and stuff. Or basically the economy is not as strong. So the interest rate kind of fluctuates a little bit based on that. Right now it's a 2.75, and that is dirt cheap right now. If you look at how much your credit card interest rates right now, they're between 24 to 27%, almost 10 times the amount. Right. So these are really low interest rate loans that I can always back and support taking out. Why? Because they allow you to have access to education. Okay. We are recording this right now, and so we'll hopefully be able to post this on the good class of the capstone 12 room afterwards. An unsubsidized loan is more like a traditional loan in the sense that interest starts to build right when you pull out the money. So that fall of senior year, fall of freshman year in college, when you pull out that $2,000, the interest starts building right away. And so freshman max is about $2,000. That interest is 2.75%, starts right away, unlike the subsidized, which interest doesn't start building until after you graduate. And for the $2,000, it's a good amount in the sense that I'd rather you borrow that $2,000 at 2.75% than, basically you're paying about $52, $55 of interest per year. I'd rather you borrow that amount, pay the $55, than having your parents have to dish out $2,000 out of their own pockets and savings in case there's an emergency or maybe an emergency flight that you need to have. It's really just about having money on hand and not having money available. So I usually encourage students to take that $2,000 because it's such a low interest rate. The last type of loan is the Parent Plus loan. This is one that we usually don't have to dig into unless absolutely required. This is a loan taken out by your parents under their credit history. The hope is that they can qualify for the lowest interest, which is at 5.30. With the Parent Plus, they can borrow as much as the cost of tuition. So it's much more flexibility. I'm always a little bit more discouraging about this amount because it's under your parents' credit and it's a higher interest. Okay, so usually what will happen is when we get the financial aid award letter, we'll calculate and I'll help your parents make a decision about what's the right package for you guys. Okay? But please don't be terrified of loans. Generally speaking about loans, we're talking about that a reasonable amount to take out in loans is about, we'll call it the cost of a compact car, about $20,000 to $25,000 for entire undergraduate. Okay, that means we're looking at payments about maybe $500 per month, right, after graduation, which is a reasonable amount. When you hear these horror stories about loans, it's usually they're borrowing $50,000 a year. Basically, they're paying for their entire tuition at a smaller liberal arts college or private school, and they do that for 4 years. Right. So when you hear nightmares about loans, it's usually because they've taken about $200,000 worth of loans for undergrad. And that's something I would never encourage anyone to do because that's just a lot of money to start off life in debt too. But when we have a conversation about loans, I'm usually encouraging that the federal subsidized and federal unsubsidized, those are good amounts. About $5,000 per year is not an unreasonable amount to take on. Okay. So please don't be afraid of these loans. Okay. Please don't be afraid. These are good loans. All right. Financial aid applications. There are two primary ones that you'll be looking at this year. The first one is the FAFSA. That's free application for federal student aid. It qualifies you for the Pell Grant, the Cal Grant, and also federal loans and work study. It needs to be resubmitted each year, so that's why I'm having you guys fill it out. Next year during the fall, you're gonna have to resubmit it again. And the worst thing to do is, hey, mom, can you fill out the FAFSA? And her not having any idea what the hell you're talking about. All right. So as a young adult, you're going to be responsible for filling out this FAFSA each year, getting your tax information from your parents. But I usually expect students to be the ones filling out because parents usually are very confused when you ask them to do it. Okay. For the reporting year, they are always asking for 2 years prior. So the fact that you guys are starting in 2021, we're going to subtract 2 years. 21 minus 2 is 19. Right. So we're going to look at tax year 2019 when it comes down to income information. The next application is the CSS profile. That is the common the College Board financial aid application. It is the reason why FAFSA is named free application because the CSS profile is not the free application. You actually have to pay College Board in order to submit this information. This is usually required by private schools or basically institutions that have a much bigger, much more money to offer, right? So schools like, let's say, NYU or any other private school will usually have you do the CSS profile. Why? Because there's a much larger gap to fill. The CSS profile digs a lot more finer into your parents' income. They talk about investments. They talk about other the value of your current home, the type of cars you own, and other savings accounts you may have, particularly if you have a business. So they will ask a lot more information. The FAFSA only asks about your primary parent or the parents that you live with. So if your parents are separated, you're only going to provide information for the parent that you live with or provides 51% or more of your support. The CSS profile will actually ask for information about your non-custodial parent, the parent that you do not live with. Okay, so it's a much more detailed application. There is a fee waiver available for the CSS profile if you had qualified for a SAT fee waiver, or if you qualify for free reduced lunch, there is an opportunity for that. Otherwise, I believe it's $25 for the first one and $60 for each additional school that you're adding. So it can add up very fast. By the way, most private schools, they're asking for both the FAFSA as well as CSS profile. All right, how's financial aid awarded? So there's one calculation called need-based. So whenever you see need-based financial aid, they're looking at how much you need as a family. There's two different ways to calculate that. The first of all is through the federal calculation that is created with the FAFSA, right? After you complete the FAFSA, there's a number that's dumped out on the confirmation page called expected family contribution. That's how much the federal government is expecting you to at least contribute to your education. Okay, the schools, private schools particularly, that use the CSS profile, they have their own calculation of how much your family is able to contribute. Right, the way your need is calculated, they look at the cost of school, the total cost of school. That includes tuition, fees, housing, airplane cost, estimates for that, books, estimate for expenditures. That sums up as something called the COA, cost of attendance. All right, they're going to subtract your family ability to pay, whether it be the EFC or their own calculation. The leftover, the cost minus your family's ability to pay is equal to need. That's how much they're trying to package for you. That's the amount they're trying to create for you based on grants, scholarships, loans, and work study. Okay. That's what they're trying to calculate for you. That's what they're trying to calculate for you in the financial aid award letter, right? Also, another factor is merit-based. Merit-based is all about, not really about how much your parents are able to pay, but how much they can provide you in order to kind of entice you to lure you to their college, Sometimes these merit-based awards can be 4 years. Basically, they'll be renewable each year as long as your grades are good. Sometimes it's a one-time freshman incentive. It just depends on the institution. So calculate the cost of going to college. This one is basically, you have your upfront or direct cost, which is tuition, fees, and housing, because in order to attend college, you need classes to go to, you need a bed to sleep in, and you need food to eat. All right, it's hard to get away around that because oftentimes in dorms, they don't have kitchens. So they need to make sure that you have food. All right, so tuition, fees are used like student body fees or access to the gym fees that's required for all students. And then housing, it's usually a bed and food. That's your direct costs, and those are usually pretty constant that you can look up online. The variable costs or additional costs that we usually don't look at so much are the cost of books, because books can be variable. It can be as much as you're going to buy books for each of the classes, or you're going to borrow them from the library or buy them used. So there's a much more variable cost. They do give you an estimate how much they expect you to pay, or it's an overestimate usually. Healthcare. As of now, you are able to be off your parents' benefit off your parents' health insurance until you're age 26, as long as you're in school. Colleges usually have a minimum coverage level. So if your insurance is able to meet that level, you don't need to purchase additional health care. Otherwise, it's about $2,000 per year. Transportation, if you're going to school in the LA area, you probably don't need additional plane flight tickets. But if you're going to the East Coast, there is expectation that you'll have to buy tickets, at least 2 or 3 round trip tickets to come back and forth for the holidays. Otherwise, they calculate hopefully the amount for gas. And then miscellaneous. This is the stuff you usually spend money on for clothes, movies, additional pizza, going out with friends. There's estimates for when talk about the cost of attendance, the COA, and they have estimates for that. So this is kind of what the college is expecting. The cost of attendance is calculated to figure out how much does it cost to go to college. All right, timeline. October to December, this is when we're submitting those financial aid applications, including the FAFSA and CSS profile. Both of them are live now. They were live as of October 1st. The California deadline, once again, is March 2nd. But the hope is that you can get that FAFSA submitted well before then. We're hoping that you'll get most of it completed by mid-November. It's just something that you want to get in by the time you submit those applications. Between January and April, that's when we get our acceptances in. That's when we learn about which college you've been admitted to. Once you've been admitted to a college, the hope is that within 2 to 3 weeks, you'll get a financial aid award letter from them saying how much money they can offer you in order for you to attend. It's impossible, really. It's impossible to make a decision about which college to go to unless you know how much you have to pay. Okay. Please don't just say, yes, I'll go anywhere, even if they charge you $55,000. Please be careful about that. Yes, Mr. Ehrlichman.
Just a quick question. I know there were some students who are interested in knowing this. When they're starting their FAFSA, they're supposed to use the prior year's tax returns? So yeah. So students who are applying this year are going to take into account their parents' 2019 returns. Is that right?
Correct. 2019. Okay. If COVID has impacted your family financially, because I know a lot of families have been struggling due to the closures and stuff, you're always able to reach out to financial aid offices and tell them about your current situation and give them an estimate about what 2020 will look like. Because realistically, like financial aid offices are run by people; they're not run by robots, right? So I just made that clear. Like, if there's any issue with their financial aid, you can always contact the financial aid office and let them know about your current situation, because things have changed since 2019. We all know that. We're living in it right now. So hopefully things will get better. But if your family finances are very different than what they were in 2019, and the 2019 is not reflective of your current financial situation, you are able to contact the financial aid office for them to reassess your financial need. Okay. Someone asked about whether their parents have done their taxes yet. 2019 should have been done by now. Unless they're doing an amendment or a revision, 2019 should have been done because it was due a couple months ago. Okay, if not, you can always do estimates for the FAFSA first, and then you can resubmit it again with official numbers once they're done. A question came up whether there's anything they can do on their application to make them more attractive to merit and scholarships. Not necessarily. The hope is that once you are admitted to the scholar, your application right now is putting yourself on the best foot forward. You're trying to present yourself as exciting and as enticing to them as possible already. So if you're doing that, you're already putting your best foot forward and trying to get a merit scholarship from there, right? Okay, that's the questions I got. And in summary, before we jump into the FAFSA, money is available to help pay for school. Always submit a financial aid application, regardless of whether your parents think you qualify or not. It's, always have them reject you before you reject them. Okay, because every little bit helps. Even if they give you a $2,000-3,000, that is going to be worth the time and effort to submit these applications. Apply early. We're hoping that you can apply by, as soon as possible. Money does theoretically have a chance to run out. I haven't seen the FAFSA run out or the Cal Grant run out, but there's a chance for it to run out. We just want to make sure that you apply early. You definitely want to make sure your financial aid application is submitted as close to when you submit your application. Hopefully not more than 2 or 3 weeks after you submit your college application, mainly because their institutional aid will run out. Like colleges only have so much scholarship money to hand out from their own pockets. So the sooner you give them information about your need, the sooner they can reply back with an offer. Okay, and also make sure that you have access to your parents' 1040s and tax records for 2019. Oftentimes colleges will ask for copies of that. And also the last thing, make sure you're checking your portals. Oftentimes people will submit their applications and go, I'm done. I put it in God's hands and then we'll see what happens. But no, because they are constantly communicating with you about additional information that they may need. This may be additional transcripts. It may be a gap in your financial information. Please check your portals regularly after you submit your application to figure out what additional information they need. They usually won't email you. It's all done through portals, so you want to check them regularly, like once a week. Okay, any questions? Okay, so we'll move on for now. Let's go ahead and start on the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, but also talk about the California DREAM Act application. So there's 2 forms that we're going to kind of be working on at the same time. The FAFSA is going to be for students who have a social security number. That means you either have you're either a U.S. citizen or have a green card. Or even a refugee status. Normally those students will qualify too. You'll be able to work on the FAFSA. If you do not have a social security number, considered undocumented or a dreamer, that's fine. We're going to work on the California DREAM Act application. All right. So let me share my screen again with those documents. All right. They're pretty much designed to kind of go line by line, exact same order. So for doing one, you can follow along with the other. Right. Let's do this. Let's do it this way. All right, so let me start off with the California DREAM Act. Once again, if you do not have a social security number, considered undocumented or a dreamer applicant, you're going to go to Google and type in CA DREAM Act application. That'll take you to this DREAM Act application website. All right, as a new applicant, you're going to click on New California DREAM Act First Time User. Once again, this is for students who don't have a social or dreamers. We're going to hit continue. If you say, the question is, do you have a social security number? The answer usually is no. And the question is, do you meet the AB 540 criteria? That essentially means that you attended California high school for 3 years and you are graduating this year. Okay, that's really the 2 primary things we're looking at. If so, then say yes, continue, and you can start application. All right, these same questions are going to be the same ones that students filled out when they were filling out the FSA ID. So if you did not, so in the previous, I asked you guys to create an FSA ID. Let me show you what that looks like. Hopefully you have done that already. If you haven't created one yet, you can do one now, and you can follow along afterwards with the recording. So an FSA ID, just Google that. It'll be that first link. If you click on that, that'll allow you to take a look at, create a username and password based on your social security number. They'll verify that eventually in a couple of days, but you can definitely start the application before it's verified. So hopefully you guys have created an FSA ID because I've asked you to do that weeks before. With that, you're going to pretty much go to, I'm just going to go to Google because Google makes everything easier sometimes. I'm just going to go FAFSA.gov, FAFSA, FAFSA.gov. That first link is going to be apply for FAFSA. And then as a new student, essentially applying for FAFSA for the first time, you can click start here. And they're going to ask you to log into the FAFSA. log in with your FSA ID. You can click on I'm the student, and you log in with your FSA ID. All right. If you haven't created one yet, you can also click on here to create one. But give me 1 second while I log into my demo portal so I can walk you guys through the application. So go ahead and log in now and then follow along as best as you can. Give me 1 second.
Well, I'm sorry, what do you use to log in?
So you're supposed to create an account through the FSA website, FSA ID, and that'll allow you to log in.
Okay, thank you.
Here it is.
Just a quick question about federal or state level aid. That applies to anyone going to any college, right? Like 4-year private liberal art community.
So the Pell Grant, the federal aid will go to any college in the nation, and even some schools in Canada. But the Cal Grant is only limited to schools in California. Okay, so the California money, that's Cal Grant, that $12,000 is only limited to public or private schools in the state of California.
Are community colleges included in that?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
awesome.
Yes they are.
Awesome.
Yes they are. All right, let me share my screen again. Okay, so you'll get this warning saying that, hey, don't be dishonest. Make sure that everything is as accurate as you can possibly make it. We're gonna hit accept. All right, the one you're applying for is going to be your 2021 application. All right. Looks like someone was in here earlier. So you can click on 2021. We're talking about the year that you will be attending college. That's when you're always applying for. The 20 to 21 application that's you're going to take summer school at the college. That they'll ask you to fill one of these out. But essentially, right now we're going to focus on 21 to 22. All right, let's start over. They're going to ask you to create a save key. So this is the password for this version of the form. After you submit it, they'll ask you to create another save key. So just use a password that you use pretty often. And make sure you write it down too, because oftentimes if you forget about writing it down and you have to reset your password, they'll delete this version of it. The fact that you haven't submitted an application yet means they're going to basically start you over from the beginning. After you submit your application at the end, you can always go back and make as many revisions as you need to. Every time you make a revision, you just make sure that you go to the very end and submit it again. Otherwise, the changes won't be uploaded to the server. We're gonna hit next. Every time you hit next, though, on each screen, it will save this page. Right. So first of all, verify that your name and social security number are correct. First name, middle initial, and last name. Middle initial is important because often, if you have a common name, there are a lot of people with that common name. Like let's say your name was John Smith. A lot of people with John Smith. So make sure you have your middle initial. Whatever's on your social security card would be best. Your date of birth. Hopefully you know that by now. Next question is you're going to make sure that your email is correct. Most likely this was copied over from the FSA ID creation. And make sure you have a phone number that your phone number, that was easy to reach you. Hit next. Your address, make sure you include apartment number if you have an apartment number. You don't need your whole building knowing your financial situation. All right. Hit next. This is a question that all of you guys should probably answer the same way. Have you lived in California for at least 5 years? That's a yes. That means all your stuff is here. Okay. If you moved to California in the last, within the last 5 years, they're going to ask you whether, first of all, are you a California legal resident as of 2016? That's a yes or no. It usually means that you lived in California for a year and a day. You can ask your parents about that. Otherwise, it's a yes. These questions for the DREAM Act are the same order. So if you are working on the DREAM Act, they are going to ask the same questions. Next question, are you a US citizen? It's yes, I am a US citizen, or no, but I'm an eligible non-citizen. Eligible non-citizens are usually students with green cards. They also have these little question bubbles. So if you have any questions about a clarification for each of these questions, that is available for you. Gonna put down US citizen for now. If you put down that you're an eligible non-citizen, they're gonna ask you for your alien registration number, which is on your green card. It's a number that starts with an A. Let me hit next for now. These questions will all answer the same way together. All right. So what will your high school completion status be by next year? It's going to be high school diploma. Okay, high school diploma. What degree, what college degree or certificate will you be working on next year? It'll be first bachelor degree. Even if you have community college credit, you are still working on your first bachelor degree. And then will you have your first bachelor degree by next year? That's a no. None of you guys will. And then what will your college grade level be when you start next year? It's going to be never attended college. Once again, even if you have, if you have community college credit, it's still going to be never attended college because you haven't been in the financial aid system yet. All right, next question. Are you interested in being considered for work study? Everyone should put yes. That way they'll hopefully include that as part of your financial aid package if you are eligible. All right, so we're all answering it the same way. High school diploma, first bachelor degree, no, never attended college first year, and then yes to work study. Okay, next. Next question, are you male or female? If you're female, that ends, you can hit next. If you are male, they're gonna ask whether you want to register for the selected service. That next question comes out as, are you registered for selected service? The answer is no, because for the most part, none of you guys have it registered yourselves yet. Next question, do you want us to register you for selected service? That should be a yes. Selected service is essentially the draft. It's known as, more popularly known as the draft. The draft is so unpopular that they're not going to call up on it. So it's just required by law in order for you to receive federal student aid. So that's a yes. Okay, we're gonna hit next. Your driver license, if you have one, but you can usually skip it. I know most of you guys just use Uber or Lyft anyway. Next question is, are you a foster youth or were you at any time at the foster care system? This is any time, right? That's a yes or no. Most students are going to be a no. If you're in foster care, you would be aware of that. Next question is highest completed education by parent 1 and then parent 2. So highest completed is either middle school, high school, college, or other. If you're not quite sure, then I would put middle school or high school. Others is too ambiguous. Okay, I'll hit next. All right, next one, we're gonna put in our high school name. Just go ahead and type Largemont. Don't need to put Largemont Chargers, Largemont. Los Angeles is the city, and the state is gonna be California. You don't have to put Largemont Charter. If you just hit that, you hit the confirm button, it'll search for our school. Our school is gonna be that first option, Largemont Charter, West Hollywood, because that's where we first started. Hit select. Okay, and that's it. Hit next. This next part is you're going to add up to 10 schools and 10 colleges you're applying to. All right. It doesn't have to be that you've submitted your application already, but you can add schools that you are applying to. You can add up to 10 each time. I know a lot of you guys have more than 10 schools on your list. So you're going to list your first 10 schools, right? And then you're going to finish the application, hit submit. And then in 2 days after it's been processed, log back in. There's a button that will say make a correction. You can remove the first 10 schools, then add your next 10 schools, and then resubmit the application again, right? That's how you're going to give access to each of your schools, your financial aid, or your FAFSA information, right? But the application only currently accepts 10 at a time. Right? When you remove a school, it doesn't, after you've submitted a school and you remove them, it doesn't mean that they lose access. They still have access to your financial aid information. If you end up making changes later on, making changes such as, updating your taxes or anything, then you'll have to resubmit them for the schools that haven't been submitted for. That's only caveat. Now, the next thing also is that you also want to make sure that your most expensive California school is listed number 1 in the order of things. All the other schools after number 1 doesn't matter. Cal Grant just looks at the first spot to trigger a Cal Grant award. Right, so I'm going to add 2 schools for now. You guys can add 2 schools for now also. You can always come back and add more schools later on. So I'm going to add, first of all, I'm going to select the state. When it comes to school name, you don't have to spell the whole name out because oftentimes they're abbreviated weirdly. So in this case, I'm going to add USC. So I know USC is called Southern California, so I'm just typing Southern California. It'll just limit the search options. So I select as the state and then the partial name of the school. So I can see that, oh, okay, now I only have 3 options. So I can see University of Southern California is a school I want to add. I'm going to put a check mark on there. And then I'm going to click on add more schools. I'm going to add one more school. All right. I'm going to add another school that's say in California. I'm going to look up, let's say Davis. Okay, we're going to type in Davis as part of the school name. I don't have to type in University of California because sometimes there's abbreviations that might throw that off. So I'm going to just type in Davis. I'm going to hit search. And look at UC Davis, University of California, Davis is there. Okay, for now I'm going to hit next because I just want 2 schools on my list for now, just to show you guys. After you hit next, they're going to list your colleges that you've added. They're going to ask you for housing plans. For any of the universities, any of the 4-year universities, I'm going to recommend that you put on campus for now. Even Cal State LA, I'll put on campus. That's going to help financial aid figure out, okay, so my intention is to live on campus, so I'm going to give you a financial aid award that will kind of cover that. When you put with parent, that's usually less money because it costs less to live at home. So that's why you want to make sure that you put on campus. If you are only applying to community colleges, or if you're going to be listed community colleges, that's when you would put parent. Okay. So I'm going to put on campus for now. As you can see, I have USC as my first school. If USC wasn't my first school, I can click on this little plus sign and move it up and down the list. Okay, so usually you want a private or UC as your #1 school, top of the list. Okay, after that, I'm gonna hit next and we'll go forward. You can always come back and add more schools later on. So one good tip to figure out, like, are they asking questions about me or my parents? Is this little flag right here? Right now it's a student information. When they ask information about your parents, they'll say parent information. Sometimes students are confused by who they're asking about. So the first question is about, the first question, we've kind of come a long way. This question in front of us is going to be marital status. What is your marital status as of today? All of you guys should be putting single. I don't care if you have a promise ring or anything or a proposal, you are still single as of today. All right, next question is, do you have children or dependents that get more than half of their support from you? Even if you have kids, most likely your parents are supporting you and your child. So that's going to be no. Everyone should be selecting no. Next question is, do you have dependents other than your children? That's a no as well. No and no for this question. We hit next. This next question, most of them won't apply to you. For instance, the first one is, are you an active duty member? That's a no. Are you a veteran of the U.S. Forces? That's a no. At any time since turning 13, were both your parents deceased? Were you in foster care, or were you a dependent or ward of the court? That is an independent question. I'm not going to answer for that for you, but usually that's a no. Next question, as determined by court, are you an emancipated minor? That's a no. None of you guys have gone to court and emancipated yourselves. Next question is, does someone other than my parent or step-parent have legal guardianship over you as determined by a court in your state of legal residence? That means you went to court to declare guardianship. Those are very unique situations. For most students, it's going to be none of the above. That last option, none of the above. If you have any questions about your position, let me know, and I'll be glad to explain anything more. Okay, next. Next question, as of July 1st, 2020, were you homeless or were you self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? All right, and this is a much more relevant question nowadays, especially due to evictions and COVID and rent issues. So if you are living either in a homeless shelter or living in your car or living in living at a motel, you could be considered homeless, and then you would answer yes. Even if you're living in let's say your aunt's place, because you don't have your own home because something might have happened, you could be considered homeless as well. So it's not just living on the street that's considered homeless. It's basically if you don't have a permanent house or a permanent home place that you consider a home, you could be considered homeless, right? So this triggers basically a lot of additional services or triggers for the college that you are in need of financial aid. All right. In this case, I'm going to put no for now. If this changes at any time, you can always go back in and modify this application and resubmit it. Okay. Next. By the way, if there's any issues with homelessness, please let us know. We do have a homeless liaison that will try to pair you up with additional services or resources. So please let us know as a school. Okay. Next question is so basically the way we answer it, we are all considered dependents on our parents for financial information. So in this case, I'm going to put down, the first option is I will provide parent information. Right? If you are considered dependent, you are required to provide parental information, unless there's some extenuating circumstance, but generally you are required to, right? At least the parent that you live with. We hit next. So this next one, as you can see, the flag changed up here. It says now it's parent information. So now we're talking about your parents, not you anymore. Okay, so as of today, what is your parents' marital status? They can either be never married, they could be unmarried but living together as if they were married. There was married or remarried, there's divorced or separated, and widowed. Any of these married, divorced, or separated or widowed will ask for a date of when that happened. Okay, so you can always ask your parents to see who remembers. You know, pit them against each other as a fun thing. Maybe not. But anyways, we're gonna put down some date. For now, you might need to go back and modify that. Oftentimes, just figuring out how far back do does your parents share resources. Hit next. So parent social security number, hopefully you have that in hand. If not, they oftentimes are available on your parents' tax forms, usually in the top right corner. If it only shows 4 numbers, that means you need to ask them for their actual social security number. Hopefully you got that when you're creating your FSA account for them. Right? If your parents do not have social security numbers, that's fine. You're just going to enter zeros. Right? If your parents do have social security numbers, you need to enter them here. Okay, but if your parents are considered undocumented, that is fine. You still have access to financial aid. Your social security number will just be 00000000009 zeros. Right. Make sure you put your parents' last name and their first initial, and then their birthday. Oops. Parent email is optional. Parent email is optional. If you don't have this information on hand, just make sure that you take a note of that you need to collect this information later. Now, parent number 2, so it's up to you to decide which parent you want to consider parent 1, parent 2, just keep it consistent through the application. So I'm going to put down my parents don't have social security numbers. Last name. Then the birthday for that second parent. Next. Next question, the same question they asked you earlier. Have your parents lived in California for at least 5 years? That doesn't matter residency status, but yes. This is where all my stuff is basically. Household size, this is where they're going to help you. Basically, they embedded a worksheet for you to figure out whether, like, the number of people in your household. That's important because we need to figure out how much that income that we're going to write in a little bit, how is that shared with how many people in the family. So right off the bat, because I put that my parents are married, they automatically populate the number 2. You know, myself is 1, right? And the next question is, your parents, how many other siblings do you have? How many other children are your parents paying for? Please include also students that are in college, because your parents are still providing their primary financial support. So include that as well. So I have a twin brother, so I'm going to say I have 1 more person in my family that my parents are taking care of. Okay, that's what that one, siblings essentially. Next box is other people. Do your parents support maybe a grandmother that now has moved in with you that they're financially supporting, or a grandparent, or maybe your parents took in your cousins and they're financially supporting them, right? That's where this other number comes into play. Okay. I'm just putting 0 for now because my parents aren't supporting anyone else. As you can see, they'll add up those numbers into this number right here. It's automatic. This is your household size. Number of dependents in college, essentially how many people are going to college next year. Don't include your parents in this number. So how many people? I'm going to put 2 because I once again have a twin brother. And so it's saying that we are both going to college next year. For the most part, you guys will either be 1 or you and a sibling. Okay, now we're going to hit next. Parent information. The question is whether your parents have completed their tax forms for 2019. Mostly it's going to be yes. 90% of you are going to put already completed. Okay. Next question, they're going to ask what type of tax return did your parents file? There are really only 3 options. That third one is not going to be an option, most likely because we're not in Puerto Rico. Second one is a foreign tax return, 1040 NR or NREZ. Okay. Most parents are going to be filing a 1040. The taxes simplified supposedly a couple years ago. So most likely they're doing 1040. The way you figure that out is if you have your parents' tax forms in front of you, it's going to look something like this. Usually it's in a little packet. Usually there's like a couple pages in front saying, H&R Block or whoever did the service for you. About maybe page 2, 3, or 4. You'll see on the top left corner always has the form type, right? It's in big bold numbers, and that's how you figure out which form they're using. In this case, it says a 1040, and that's the one I'm going to use. Most of your parents will have a 1040. Okay, so I'm just like 1040 right there. Next question is, what is my parents' filing status? That is listed on the 1040, that first section right here. One of these will be checked under filing status. It'll either be, usually it's either married, filed jointly, or filing separately, or head of household. It's usually going to be one of these three usually. Okay. So whatever's check marked on that form. So just refer to the form to figure out which is the right option for you. I'm going to put down that my parents filed married or married joint return. Next option shows up is the IRS data retrieval tool. The IRS data retrieval tool is a great tool, and it's gotten a lot better over the years. All right, what you're going to do is you're going to enter your information, your parents' information as it appears on the tax form. When you click on link to, there's a button that will say link to IRS. What it does, it copies the tax information from the IRS directly onto your FAFSA application and verifies it. This reduces one step later in case you are picked for verification from the financial aid office. This is a very important step that if you can do it, you should do it. Sometimes you're not able to do it. For instance, if a name change happened, or if your parents were victims of identity theft, usually you can't use the tool then. You have to manually enter numbers, and we're going to manually enter numbers today. But generally, as a tip, you'll see this page after you select link to IRS. Okay, all this information, name, filing status, and address need to match exactly how it was entered on the information here on the 1040 form for 2019. It needs to match exactly. So copy it letter for letter, word for word. All right. What happens sometimes is the big difference is sometimes parents will spell out street instead of ST, and then the way you type it in, you don't make that distinction. It'll say that they weren't able to find your parents' taxes. So you just want to make sure that it matches exactly as it appears on the 1040. So that's where the data is being pulled from. Okay. After you've done that, you're going to hit submit. They're going to tell you whether you want to transfer that data over. You're going to say yes, and they'll automatically populate a lot of that information on your FAFSA form. I can't do it today because I'm using a demo account. We hit next. If you had used the IRS data retrieval tool, this section will say link to IRS, so you don't worry about this. Otherwise, they're going to ask you to look at your IRS tax form and copy whatever line they're asking you to look for. So in this case, they're asking for the adjusted gross income for 2019. That number is available on the 1040 line 8B. Okay, so when that happens, what you're going to do is you're going to have your, sorry, I was doing a speed test. You're going to have your tax forms open at the same time as having your FAFSA. Oops, wrong one. Okay, so usually you're going to be able to look for the forms on the 1040 next to you. So as you can see, it says I'm supposed to look for line 8B on 1040. So 1040 up here, right? And I'm looking for line 8B. So on the right side, they have all the rows numbered. So I'm looking. Oh, 8B is there, and whatever's in that spot right there, that's what I'm going to enter for this information question. Okay, so it says 40,000, so I'm going to enter 40,000. Okay, they direct you exactly to where to look, which is important. We hit next. Next question isn't available on 1040, but they were asking for how much your parent 1 made versus how much your parent 2 made. Right? They basically they're splitting up the income based on how much they made, because the 1040 is a combined number usually. So you're gonna have to ask your parents or ask them to look at the W-2. That's those small little sheets at the back of your tax information. There's usually one for each parent, depending on how many jobs they had. So I'm going to say that my parents made about even across the board. Right? But generally, you want to copy this from the W-2 as income. It may not always match up what the adjusted gross income combined is, by the way. Next question is, you indicated that your parents filed a 1040. Did they qualify? Did they file a Schedule 1 as well? And so what you're gonna do is you're gonna flip a few pages behind, usually it's the next page after 1040, or maybe 2 or 3 pages after that. You'll see something called a Schedule 1, or you might not see it. A lot of parents, if they're just regular W-2, regular salary workers, they won't have a Schedule 1. It's usually if they have like independent businesses or whatnot, or contractors. So if it says Schedule 1 through your sheets, once again, a lot of your parents won't have that. But you flip through the tax forms, if they say Schedule 1, that's a yes then. Okay, I'm gonna put no because my parents didn't. If you say yes, they're gonna ask you for whether your parents are a dislocated worker. That means they are unemployed. They were either fired or laid off currently. Okay, I'm gonna put no for now. Okay, next. This next question is they're asking how much your parents paid in income taxes for 2019. So they're asking for line 14 minus schedule 2. In my case, I don't have a schedule 2, so I'm just going to look at line 14. So I'm going to scroll down, looking for line 14. 14 is 0. Yeah, I'm going to put $1,000. Okay. All right. So whatever number's there, if it's blank, that means it's 0. Okay. So your family is low income. Oftentimes it will be 0. Otherwise, there'll be some number under line 14, or $1,000. At this point, you can compare whether your parents paid more taxes than Trump did. Haha, just kidding. Hit next. These next questions are usually 0. They're usually blanked out because they're more specific circumstances. First one is questions whether your parents received combat pay. This only is if they're active military. Next question is if they received any sort of living allowances or scholarships from working for an educational program like AmeriCorps. That's usually a 0. Next one is educational credit. This is when you look for schedule 3, line 3 of, once again, flipping through their parents' tax forms, looking for that schedule 3 listed on the top left corner. If not, it's just gonna be 0. Untaxed portions of IRA distributions. This is usually when your parents are retired. So usually that's a 0. And then IRA's deductions and payments to self-employment. You can look at your tax form schedule 1 if there was anything there, but usually it's a 0. Taxes and interest, usually whatever's on line 2A. Once again, we're looking back at the form, see if there's anything in that 2A. That's usually on the first page. If it's blank, that's going to be 0. Most of our families, especially your family's low income, it's going to be 0 for these questions. Next question is child support paid. All right, child support paid, if there's any there. The rest of these are usually 0. Cooperative education program by college, that's usually 0. And then taxable earnings from need-based employment, that's usually 0. So that's work study stuff. Your parents are out of college for the most part. 0. Next. Next questions, we're going to ask about child support received. This is where some of you guys may have a number there. And then these rest of them are usually 0, because next one's about food allowances paid for military clergy. That's usually 0. Next question is a tax deferred retirement savings plan. You're going to have to ask your parents about this because you'll check the W-2 forms and there's specific boxes that you're referring to. Veterans allowances or death disability, that's going to be usually 0. Untaxed income not reported anywhere else, just workers' comp. That might be a little bit more thing nowadays, but not for 2019, most likely. Next. Oftentimes, if your parents are considered low income, they'll ask you if you want to skip the rest of these questions. If you have this option, say yes. That means they have enough information. They don't need to know any more information. If your family's more middle income or have more assets, they're going to ask you to fill it out. To ask this question oftentimes is, as of today, what is your parents' total cash balance, savings, and checking accounts? I always describe this as how much is in your bank account after the bills have been paid, after the rent has been paid, after your cell phone bill has been paid. The reason for that is the amount in your bank account is very different from when you get paid to after your bills have been paid. Okay, so we're talking about the lower amount in your taxes. I mean, in your bank account. Okay. If you have no money in the bank account, 0 is the final option, fine number. Next question is, how much is your net worth of your parents' investments, including real estate? We're not including your parents' primary home, only including how much if they have a secondary home or investment property, or they have investments, or essentially stocks. That's where you enter there. 0 is a fine number if you don't have any. And then as of today, what is the net worth of your parents' current business? They say business and farms, but farms usually doesn't involve our families. So current business, only if they have only if they have more than 100 employees. So it's a family business only only your mom and dad works there, don't include that amount. It's only if you have more than 100 employees. But usually that's a 0 as well. Okay, we hit next. All right. So we have a few more minutes. As you can see, now it's switched to student information. Student information now. For you, most of this information is going to be 0 because you guys oftentimes don't have regular employment at this point, but it's going to be student information. What ends up happening oftentimes when they see these questions, oh, didn't I just answer these? Oh, I'll just enter the same information twice. What ends up happens then is that means you double reported income. So it's important that you recognize whether it's a parent question or a student question. This is your student question. For you, questions, have you submitted your taxes for 2019? Didn't work, no taxes. So it's not going to file. Okay, right, next. Sorry for the noise in the background. They're chopping down some trees or something. How much did you earn in 2019? For the most part, it's going to be 0. Okay. If you had a little bit of money, like less than $1,000, I wouldn't mention it, just put 0. Because essentially that money's spent by now. All these are going to be 0 for the student because you don't pay child support or any of that stuff. Okay, this is usually for adult students. Same thing for this area. They've already asked about whether you receive child support as a family, so don't mention that here. It'll be 0 all the way through. And next. And then they're going to ask you, do you want to skip assets? If they ask you these questions, once again, how much is your checking account? If you have $200 or $300, just 0 it out. Why? Because you're going to end up spending that money before prom anyway. Prom, fingers crossed. Net worth as of today, unless you have Bitcoin, that's going to be 0. And then current business, usually 0. Okay, next. Oh no, I had an error again. So after this is basically the signature page. And unfortunately, I can't show that to you because the FAFSA crashed. That's why it's important to hit next every single time because it'll save your progress. Unfortunately, because the demo website I have, you can't see it. So next question is about whether you are prepared. That's always a no. You are not the preparer. I'm not a preparer because I'm a school counselor, so I don't count. The next question at that will be signing signatures. So your FSA ID is going to be your online signature. So they're going to ask you essentially just sign here, click on that, fulfills your part of the signature page. For parents, so that's why you need to create an FSA account for your parents. If your parents have a social security number, you can create a FSA ID for them. Once again, make it simple. Use your username is put mom or dad after it, user, mom, user, dad, whatever that was, and use the same password. Okay. Even when you create the FSA account for them, those security questions, answer them the way you answered your questions. Your parents aren't going to be using the FSA ID for anything else but you or your siblings financially. Okay. You're going to be able to sign for them online with the FSA ID and just click sign here, put in their ID and password and hit submit. And then the last step is to submit your application. So nothing is done until you hit the submit button. So submit application and then you're good. You'll get a confirmation page. Usually with your EFC, you're expecting family contributions. So write that down so you have an idea of how much the government is expecting you to pay. If your parents do not have are unable to create a FSA ID or they don't have a social security number, then you're going to do the option that says print signature page. When you print signature page, you're going to have to actually physically print out that form. Your parents are going to physically sign it, one of them, and date it. And then there's an address for you to mail that physical letter to. Right? So make sure you put it in an envelope and stamp the envelope and submit that physically. Right? After you print that form, still go to the next page and hit submit your application. There was a mistake last year where they printed the form, they mailed it in, but they didn't hit the submit button. And therefore, the FAFSA Processing Center got the signature sheet, but no FAFSA to match it up to. So make sure you submit it at the end. You need to once again submit it at the end in order to save all changes through the application. And that's pretty much it. That information will then be sent to your financial aid office in order to figure out what your award entitlement is. Any questions about the whole process? I know it's really fast. We are recording it now, so you can go back and slow and pause at every step of the way. If you want me to review or go through your application individually, by all means, please create an appointment with me, and I'll be glad to walk you through the rest of the application or answer any questions your parents may have. And we made it before the timeline. Any questions, guys, about the process or anything you might have? All right, in that case, that sums it up for me. Thank you very much for your time. Remember that, as Mr. Ehrlichman said, please notify your teachers that if you are doing early decision, please remind them that the application is due next week. Please take care of that. Yeah.
Mr. Koch, can you return host? I made you host because
Sure,
my
no problem.
my internet was a little unstable at some point.
No problem.
Just want to remind everybody, I know dates have been kind of flexible in here, but you do have an assignment that is due tonight at midnight in responding to that video and the Nerd Wallet site about cost of living calculator. So take some time, half an hour or so, shouldn't take you too long, to go rewatch that video if you need to, and play around with the Nerd Wallet calculator. Also, if you are doing early decision, let me know so that I can prioritize feedback on the draft of your personal statement that you submitted. Question says, will we have more summative assignments? Yeah, probably. Yeah, that's a good question because we've only had that one in the brag sheet. But it is a good question. Yes, we will try to create some more summative assignments so you guys can get more points that way. But again, guys, this class is not about skills and credits. It's about making sure you get your job done. So if you're getting your job done, you're going to get an A in the class. Okay, that's the point. Get your job done and you get an A. Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Coe, anything you want to add?
That's about it for now.
Thank you so much for taking us through that. I recorded it as well. I'm going to put it on the site if anybody needs to go back and rewatch any portion of it. All right. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ehrlichman. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, Mr. Go. Bye, Mr. E. Have a
Stick
great
around
weekend.
if you have
Thank you.
questions. Stick around. I'll be here for a few more minutes.